Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today we're back with another list video showcasing my favorite comic books publisher. Of course I'm talking about Marvel Comics. And today's topic is 10 Marvel Comics runs you should read. And now, while a few of the entries on this list I consider to be must-read material, I think that I tried to recommend in this list things that are maybe not the main recommendations that most videos do. These are a little bit of the off-the-beaten-path recommendations that I still think are really solid, but are maybe not your top-tier A-list everyone's recommending books. Anyway, I hope you like it, and before we get to it, consider checking out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. You can find a link in the description. If you want to pick up a book, you can use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Any order you do make with that affiliate link or code will get me a small commission, but frankly, it's a great way to support the channel. Thank you for considering. Now on with today's list. First on the list, in no particular order, we have the Daredevil run by Charles Soule. Why I put this on the list is because I think that this is a rock-solid Daredevil run. However, I think this run gets lost in the midst of just incredibly iconic Daredevil creative runs. Daredevil, for my money, is one of the most consistently great superhero comics across the last several decades, so it's easy to overlook runs that are considered lesser. Even when standing alone, they're still pretty fantastic. And that's where I see Charles Soule's run. I do think it's a bit underserved, though I am happy to see that it got an oversized omnibus edition that collected the entire run. I wasn't lucky enough to get a copy of that this last printing. Hopefully in the future I can upgrade. Right now I have this entire run on these small trade paperbacks, but it's a perfectly fine edition in which to collect this run. I have done a review of this first one, the volume 1, that has the first couple issues in the run. Overall, what I like about this is that we have not only a cool, fresh new suit, and we have Daredevil taking on kind of a protege or sidekick in the character of Blindspot, which is another fascinating wrinkle and development for our favorite horned hero. But I really love the art on this book. The art throughout it is consistently in this style, and it just really pops from the page. In fact, I consider it kind of pop arty in many ways. I think it sets itself apart from a lot of the other contemporary Daredevil runs in this way, and I think this art style let them explore kind of some darker aspects of Daredevil and his mythos in a way that communicated in the storytelling so well. Yeah, just a fantastic run here. Soule should not be understated, and again, wanted to include it on the list because I've heard way too many times, hey, is Charles Soule's Daredevil run worth reading? Well, let this be the resounding yes you might need to hear to check it out. I do think it's great. I do think there are better Daredevil runs out there, but if you've already enjoyed those, or you just like this style or like the creative team, jump on it. It's a great run. Definitely recommend it. Next on our list today, we're going to be talking about Wolverine by Greg Rucka. I have this entire run in this Ultimate Collection paperback from Marvel Comics. For some reason, this has never been given a hardcover, oversized, like omnibus treatment, and I think with how well the Wolverine omnibuses sell, I really hope sometime in the future we get an omnibus edition. Even if it would be a little bit short, maybe they could pad it out with extras, or frankly, there are small omnibuses out there, and I would definitely double dip to get this in an upgraded format. But anyway, in this paperback, it's still a really fun read. Unfortunately, this paperback has also been long out of print, but you can still find it on secondary markets. To me, this is a great kind of rough and tumble traveling Wolverine. It has kind of a across the U.S. Hitchhiking or travel narrative mixed into this run. There is a lot of fascinating kind of mystery kind of work with this. Wolverine feels very isolated from the rest of the Marvel Universe throughout this run, at least in my opinion, but I really like it that way. We see a lot more human aspects of Wolverine, of Logan throughout this run, and I think it set itself apart. I really enjoy what we read here. I think the stories are crisp and interesting, and for my money, this whole run starts with one of my favorite issues of comic books of all time. We have the kind of journal entry monologue of this young woman who is actually the apartment neighbor of Wolverine, and unbeknownst to her, she has no idea who Wolverine is, his abilities, or exactly what he does. she just refers to him as the mean man. But throughout this issue, we find out that this woman is basically in danger and living in a really dire circumstance, and she kind of tries to befriend the grumpy Wolverine. Anyway, things go very sideways for this young woman, unfortunately, but in steps Wolverine into the prime action spot, and we have an inciting incident that kicks off the rest of the run. A really powerful way to begin a run, and we have sharp Rucka dialogue and storytelling throughout the whole run, in my opinion. Definitely a run that should be read. Next on our list of 10 Marvel comic runs you should be reading, The Invincible Iron Man by Matt Fraction and Salvador Larroca. This is another one that bafflingly hasn't gotten an omnibus treatment yet, although we have these nice oversized hardcover editions that are the same trim size, so for collectors out there, you can still find these for relatively cheap online last time I checked, and it's a great way to collect a pretty fantastic run in my opinion, or at least most of it. For me, this is really my definitive Iron Man comic book run. I have never really cared more about this character in a proper Iron Man titled comic book than I have in the pages of Matt Fraction's run. For whatever reason, I don't know that Iron Man omnibuses sell as great as I feel they should, but this is a real banger of a run. Fraction to me is definitely a really great comic book creator. I love what he did on Hawkeye. I'm a really big fan of his Fantastic Four run that I also think is pretty underappreciated. Anyway, I do just want to see more people checking out this Iron Man run. I think for those that are interested in picking up a proper Iron Man comic book run, there's no better start for me. If you're looking for a single Iron Man story in the modern era, I prefer Iron Man Extremis, which I've also reviewed on the channel. Extremis? At any rate. But the actual comic book one proper, I point them squarely at Matt Fraction's Iron Man. I don't know if I've actually reviewed this book on the channel. If you'd like to see it, let me know in the comments. I might have to go ahead and do a full review on it to bring further light to a really great comic run. I love the artwork as well from Salvador Larroca. It's a very distinctive style that is really hard to miss, and I think it really has a good sense of the technology and the modern kind of progressiveness that this run tries to capture. I think the art conveys that full well. Even if the art style is not a personal favorite of mine, I think it's very fitting for the run itself. Definitely don't sleep on Matt Fraction's Invincible Iron Man. And hey, if you're enjoying this video and you have yet to subscribe to the channel, I encourage you to do so. I'm always doing list videos, comic book reviews, unboxings, shorts, community posts, and more. Anyway, thank you for considering. Now let's keep going with today's list. Next on my recommendation list of Marvel runs you should be reading, Wolverine and the X-Men by Jason Aaron. So for me, this is maybe a polarizing decision as well. For whatever reason, I feel like the critical reception to this run is very, very mixed, and I find that to be a bit odd because I think this run is a ton of fun. I know there was a lot of good publicity for it when it was coming out, but I feel like shortly after that, I just didn't hear a lot of people talking about it. And I think even in the modern landscape, when we have this omnibus available and out for people, I just didn't hear as much of a buzz as I was hoping to hear. And I think that this run is really great. For those that maybe don't know, it involves Wolverine playing the kind of Charles Xavier role. He's now the headmaster of the School for Gifted Mutants. We have a whole new class of young, impressionable mutants. He has to staff this school, and this is kind of what he's doing when he's not doing X-Force missions or really gnarly work with the X-Men. This is him trying to help bring up this whole new generation of kids. The art style is very poppy and interesting. We have that kind of heavy outlined animated look, but it fits not only the characters, not only the storytelling, but the whole kind of vibe of this book, the story arcs. It's just really well done. I think it's also a softer touch for Jason Aaron, who does a lot of really gritty work at Marvel. I think that this is really a fun and really uniquely toned book. It feels like X-Men High, it feels like X-Men Junior, but there's still a lot of the adult X-Men characters and that roster of characters that really keep you gripped. This is where I really began to really enjoy Quentin Quire as a character, for example. I know he was introduced in New X-Men, but this to me is really where that character shines first and foremost. Anyway, I just think it's a great run. I want to see more people talking about it again. I think more people should be reading it. It does get bogged down a bit in the Avengers vs. X-Men era, but I think if you've enjoyed that storyline, you'll also still very much enjoy this book, beginning, middle, and end. Next on my list of comic book runs from Marvel, you should be reading The New Mutants. To showcase that, I'm going to be looking at the New Mutants Omnibus Volume 1 from Marvel Comics. They've released other collected editions throughout the years. Another good notable example is the Epic Collection line. Anyway, this is the first real X-Men spin-off book in my mind. This is taking place kind of branching off of Uncanny X-Men at a time where we believe all of the primary cast of X-Men were dead or lost in space. Xavier's ready to quit his whole dream, his whole idea, but in come a lot of these impressionable teenage mutants who need help, who need guidance, and thus the New Mutant team is born. They're not really initially designed to be a kind of crime-fighting force like the X-Men. They're just trying to be gifted youngsters who get kind of mentor-trained, and maybe eventually they'll play up with varsity on the X-Men. But of course, they get into a lot of really superheated adventures all their own, and what sets this series apart for me is another really good cast of solid characters. And I think that there's not as much mainstream recognition for a lot of the primary cast outside of the comic book sphere. We haven't seen this really successfully developed in live action, in my opinion, so a lot of just cultural awareness. You maybe haven't heard of some of the main players here, but as a comic fan, you've probably seen them, and maybe you're more well versed in the New Mutants than I am. But I do think it's a book that a lot of X-Men fans out there would really enjoy, or if you like a book that follows a younger cast of characters that aren't really obnoxious but are just interesting, highly recommend New Mutants. I also think that the art is absolutely stellar, and this is the beginning of a very, very cool run that should, again, just kind of be talked about. Not every story within this omnibus is a hit for me, but I think with the characters being so solid and the plot lines being genuinely interesting, it is a run I could confidently recommend for the most part for the Marvel comic fan out there looking for a new series they maybe have yet to check out. Don't miss out on the New Mutants. Okay, next up on our list is a recent read for me, Thor by Matt Fraction. Of course, to showcase this, I have the Thor by Matt Fraction omnibus here for you all to take a look at. This run occurs, I believe, after the stuff from JMS and Kieran Gillen, taking place also after the events of, I believe, Siege. I think that was what was prior to this. Anyway, I think that this is a fair spot to start if you know a little bit of the basics of what happens at the end of those runs. And really, this is just a fascinating time in Thor's history. We have Asgard, or the Asgardians, the remnant of Asgard, all hovering above Oklahoma somewhere outside of their own usual realm. That leads to a lot of stories that are closer to Earth, literally and sometimes figuratively. But we still have a ton of mythological-like characters, a lot of really kind of high fantasy genre kind of concepts in this superhero story. And for that, I think it's a really fun read. I really enjoy Fraction, like I mentioned earlier, with the Invincible Iron Man, and so I thought I'd put another one of his on the list today. I also think the art in this collection is pretty fantastic. There are a bunch of different artists, but Olivier Coipel, I don't know how to say that name, but Coipel's art throughout is some of the best comic book art I've seen in recent memory. Absolutely stunning stuff here. There are a ton of storylines throughout Fraction's run. This whole omnibus is just shy of 1,400 pages. Some of the story arcs are a bit uneven, some are better than others. We also have the Fear Itself event during this run, and I thought that was a really fun Marvel event that not enough people are still talking about. I really enjoyed my time reading that, and I think that this is just a run that when we think about Thor, I know people talk about Simonson, people thought about Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's stuff, people talk about Jason Aaron's run, but here for your consideration is another one, Matt Fraction. And if you're interested in a full review of this run, this omnibus, you can catch a recent video I did on the channel. It should still be available, or you could look at my Thor playlist. Anyway, that's there for further resources if you want a little bit more of my thoughts on this run. Anyway, onward and upward. Okay, next up, can you believe it? We have a three-peat here from Matt Fraction once again. Fantastic Four by Matt Fraction, the All Reds, and Mark Bagley. This omnibus contains the entirety of the Fantastic Four and FF titles penned by Matt Fraction following the events of Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four. For longer-time fans of this channel, you'll know that I am a gigantic fan of Fantastic Four, and this run in particular. Yes, I think Jonathan Hickman's run is much better. Yes, I think there are still better Fantastic Four runs than this as well. But I think a lot of people were unfairly critical of this run because anything that followed Hickman's incredible tenure on the title, I'm sure was going to be looked at a little bit more harshly. And following that run, I do see how this is a bit of a step down as far as the scope and how some of the narrative was handled, but I think that this is a fantastic run. We get not only the main Fantastic Four title that follows our favorite family with their kiddos, going throughout all time and space to kind of try to save their lives. While that's happening, back in New York, back in the Baxter Building, we have the FF, the Future Foundation, these kind of up-and-coming youngsters who are tomorrow's minds and like kind of the brightest. They're left behind. They need Fantastic Four to kind of be mentors over them. We need that Fantastic Four to defend Earth, the Baxter Building, and all this stuff, right? So each of the Fantastic Four members essentially made a delegate, and here we have a new Fantastic Four team led by Scott Lang's Ant-Man. We have She-Hulk, we have one of the Human Torch's girlfriends, and we have Medusa of the Inhumans. That team takes over not only as the Fantastic Four in the absence of our main family, but also overhead of the Future Foundation. It's a really fun run, and we go back and forth between their issues. FF is illustrated by Mike Allred, and we have the Fantastic Four run proper, mostly illustrated by Mark Bagley. So some great art, some great stuff here. Definitely recommend it as a must-read Marvel comic run. Okay, next on the list of Marvel runs you should be reading, I'm going to go with The Thing by John Byrne. So admittedly, I'm still making my way through this venture, but I am really digging it. For fans of John Byrne's Fantastic Four run, I would consider this a kind of must-read companion piece. It occurs roughly around the same time as that Byrne Fantastic Four run, and it follows our favorite blue-eyed monster, The Thing. Now, I do believe The Thing essentially had his own solo book with Marvel 2-in-1. I know we had a lot of solo adventures starring him, but this is his first really solo titled series as far as I'm aware, and having the incredible John Byrne writing it, it is just a ton of fun. The early adventures in this omnibus follow The Thing, kind of in his off time around the Fantastic Four adventures, in his Yancey Street around New York, until the events of Marvel's Secret Wars. During that event, something transpires with the Thing on Battleworld, and ultimately he decides to basically be somewhere else. And without spoiling too much, a large portion of this omnibus has to do where the Thing is after the events of Marvel's Secret Wars. He's having his own special solo adventures, and there are kind of genre-bending elements to it that make it feel more like a fantasy science fiction series. It is a really good kind of change of pace for this character that really just draws out some of the character's strengths, helps fully define this character, and it really just shows me how well the Thing can stand alone as a character. Really a fun read there. Ultimately, we have him back in New York, picking things up kind of where he left off, dealing with fallout and different aspects as well. But anyway, a really great offering for fans of the Fantastic Four, and especially for fans of The Thing. I had to include it because I think a lot of people overlook this run, and yes, it's not quite as prolific as the Fantastic Four run by John Byrne, but like I said, if you like these characters, if you like that run, I do think that this is a fantastic companion piece that more people should be reading. Next up, one of my all-time favorite comedy series in the big two, I have to go with Howard the Duck by Chip Zdarsky and Joe Quinones. This series was an absolute blast. Yes, I did read and review it once upon a time on the channel, so search that out if you want my more full thoughts on this omnibus, on this run from Chip Zdarsky. But essentially, it is a comedic series following the titular Howard the Duck as he gets into all sorts of antics and misadventures around the Marvel Universe. I think in the way a good comedy book can, it really does poke fun at this entire universe, the selection of characters, and I think for longer-term Marvel fans, the humor in here is even more funny. The more characters you know within the Marvel Universe, the more jokes are going to land throughout this book, but I do think at the same time, this is great for brand new readers who just want to follow a quirky character through misadventures again in the Marvel Universe. Howard the Duck is really sarcastic, witty, glib, and fun, but he has a lot of heart, and so do a lot of the supporting cast within this run. This run really opened my eyes on the tremendous range that Chip Zdarsky has as a storyteller. I think for me to care as much about this silly duck character that I'm almost brought to tears by some of the character bits in this omnibus, and knowing that this comes from the same person that gave me complete a Zdarsky Batman run and that gritty Daredevil run. It just is, again, a tremendous accomplishment, and I really love what I read here in these pages. I think more people should absolutely check out Howard the Duck. The art from Joe Quinones is really animated, exciting, electric even. A lot of the illustrations jump right off the page, and the style just stays with me. There's a lot of narrative and even artistic experimentation throughout this book. The run isn't over long, but it's definitely something I've been fascinated with the last year or so since reading it. In fact, looking through some of these pages, I might need to give this series a reread sometime soon. If you haven't yet, definitely search it out. You can sometimes at the time of this recording still find it for pretty cheap. Don't miss out on Howard the Duck. And the final entry on our list of great Marvel runs you should be reading, I'm going to go with Captain America by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is an omnibus I got to read not too long ago, and it's still fresh in my mind. One of the reasons I want to include it on here is I think that a lot of people pass this run by. Yes, it's a very modern Captain America run, but for my money, it felt in some ways the most refreshing of the runs I've read since around Ed Brubaker. Maybe that's a polarizing, controversial opinion, but I just felt the characters to be really gripping. We had a really interesting team dynamic within this book that I won't spoil too much here for those that want to experience it for themselves, but it was a very interesting cast of supporting characters for a Captain America book, I felt, but I think it absolutely worked. I think we got to see different layers to Steve Rogers in this book that I also really enjoyed being a fan of that character. He feels back to true blue, moralistic Steve Rogers, and I was just rooting for him. I wanted him to just come out on top, because that's another thing this run really dealt with, was he's very much in an underdog position yet again throughout the run by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Public perception of Captain America and even the ideals he espouses is at an all-time low, so we have him not only fighting injustice and the forces of evil, but his own kind of PR disaster of a life, and I think that that was really good. The art throughout it is absolutely great, and I think that the dialogue was all very sharp. As a Captain America fan, or at least a growing Captain America fan, I was still very impressed by this book. It was definitely better than I had hoped and expected it to be. Again, this is another one I've reviewed on the channel, so if you want a greater sense of this book, you can check out that review. But for me, I just want to see more people reading it. I want to discuss this more with people out there. I know there are a handful of Captain America fans, and I just want more people to check out the run. Frankly, I enjoyed this run so much, I kind of want to look out for the Black Panther run by Ta-Nehisi Coates. If you've read that and you enjoyed it, or maybe you didn't, let me know in the comments. I'd love more feedback on that run as well, because this whole run just left a good impression for me, and I'd love to read more of Ta-Nehisi Coates' comic book bibliography. And with that, we've reached the end of our 10 Marvel comic runs you should read video. Like I said at the jump, this is a list of not like the topmost tier recommendation, A-list recommendation video that everyone recommends. For example, if you're going to read a Fantastic Four run, I'd probably recommend Jonathan Hickman, not Matt Fraction. Or if you're going to read Captain America, of course I'm going to recommend Ed Brubaker, maybe not Ta-Nehisi Coates. But I think there's enough videos that cover some of those go-to recommendations, but I wanted to provide a more extensive list of more off the beaten path recommendations. Maybe you don't want to read the runs everyone's been talking about, or maybe you already have and you're looking for stuff that's still really good that maybe more people aren't talking about. That's where this video comes in, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you think of some of my picks in the comments, and I would really love if this comment section also had your picks for really great Marvel Comics runs you think more people should be reading. I'm always up for a good recommendation, especially for comic books, so let me know in the comments. You can even throw in your favorite indie published series or maybe DC Comics series that you think more people should read. Bonus points if it, again, isn't a go-to recommendation, but something you still think is really solid. Anyway, big thank you to all of you if you've stuck around this long. Please don't forget to give this video a like, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. If you liked it, also leave that comment again, and maybe share this video with a friend or check out one of my others. Until next time, have a good one.